found my fiancée kissing her ex at our engagement party. When I confronted her, she called it just a goodbye kiss and mocked me as an insecure loser. She laughed when I walked away, thinking she'd gotten away with it. The next morning, she woke up to find her father listening to a voicemail where she admitted she'd been seeing her ex for months. Hey viewers, welcome to the channel. We are just starting and your support means a lot. If you enjoy these stories, please consider subscribing and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. I, Trevor, 28M, my fiancée, Cassie, 26F, and I had been together for 4 years. We got engaged 6 months ago, and I genuinely believed I was the luckiest man alive. She was beautiful, ambitious, and had this infectious laugh that could light up any room. Everyone told us we were perfect together, and I believed them. Problems started subtly about 3 months ago when Cassie reconnected with her college ex-boyfriend, Nathan, 27M. She mentioned it casually. They'd run into each other at a coffee shop, exchanged numbers, and decided to catch up as friends. I didn't think much of it at first. We all have history, and I trusted her completely. But then Nathan started appearing in conversations more frequently. Cassie would mention funny things he'd said, interesting projects he was working on, or how much he'd matured since college. She'd light up when talking about him in a way that made me slightly uncomfortable, but I pushed those feelings aside. Didn't want to be the jealous fiancé who couldn't handle his partner having male friends. The first real red flag came when Cassie started working late more often. She'd text me around 6 p.m. saying she had to stay at the office for a last-minute project or client meeting. These late nights became more frequent, and she'd come home energized in a way that seemed inconsistent with being tired from work. When I asked about her late nights, Cassie would give me detailed explanations about work projects that seemed almost too elaborate. She'd mention specific clients and deadlines, but when I tried to follow up on these projects in later conversations, she'd seem confused or change the subject. It felt like she was creating fictional work scenarios to cover for something else. I also noticed changes in her appearance and behavior. Cassie started buying new clothes, wearing more makeup, and paying extra attention to her hair. She'd always been put together, but this felt different, more deliberate and styled. When I complimented her on looking nice, she'd say she was trying to be more professional at work or that she'd seen something online she wanted to try. Her phone habits changed too. Cassie had always been casual about her phone, leaving it around the house and not caring if I saw her messages. But suddenly, she was protective of it. She'd take it with her to the bathroom, sleep with it face down, and angle the screen away from me when texting. When I mentioned this change, she said she was trying to be more mindful about screen time and privacy. The gaslighting was subtle but effective. Every time I expressed concern about her behavior, Cassie would turn it back on me. I was being paranoid. I was letting wedding stress make me insecure. I was projecting my own issues onto innocent situations. She'd remind me that she'd chosen to marry me, not anyone else, and that I should trust her judgment. I started doubting myself. Maybe I was being unreasonable. Maybe the stress of wedding planning was making me see problems that didn't exist. Cassie was skilled at making me feel like the problem every time I raised concerns about her behavior. The situation escalated when we started planning our engagement party. Cassie insisted on a large celebration with friends and family from both sides. She was excited about the party and spent weeks planning every detail. She talked about how important it was to celebrate our love with everyone who mattered to us. About 2 weeks before the party, Cassie mentioned that she'd invited Nathan. She said it would be weird not to invite him since they'd become such good friends and he was an important part of her life. She framed it as being inclusive and mature, saying that exes could be friends and that our relationship was strong enough to handle it. I wasn't comfortable with Nathan being at our engagement party, but I didn't want to seem controlling or insecure. When I expressed mild concern, Cassie accused me of being jealous and immature. She said I was being unfair to Nathan, who had been nothing but supportive of our relationship. She made me feel guilty for not wanting to include someone who was important to her. Looking back, I realized this was another manipulation tactic. Cassie was normalizing Nathan's presence in our lives by making his attendance at our engagement party seem reasonable and mature. She was also testing my boundaries to see how much she could get away with. The night of the engagement party, everything seemed perfect at first. Our families were there, our friends were celebrating with us, and Cassie looked absolutely stunning in a blue dress I'd never seen before. She was charming and gracious, playing the perfect bride-to-be role. I felt proud to be marrying her and grateful for all the love and support surrounding us. Nathan arrived about an hour into the party, and I'll admit he seemed like a genuinely nice guy. He was polite, congratulated us both sincerely, and seemed to blend in well with our friend group. I started to feel silly for being concerned about his presence. Maybe Cassie was right and I had been overthinking things. But as the night progressed, I noticed Nathan and Cassie talking more frequently. They'd find each other in different corners of the venue, having what looked like intimate conversations. When I'd approach them, they'd quickly switch to talking about work or mutual friends from college. Their body language seemed overly familiar for people who were supposedly just reconnecting as friends. About 2 hours into the party, I realized I hadn't seen Cassie for a while. I looked around the venue but couldn't find her anywhere. I asked a few people if they'd seen her, but nobody had noticed where she'd gone. After about 15 minutes of searching, I decided to check outside. That's when I saw them. Cassie and Nathan were in the parking lot, partially hidden behind a car. They were kissing, not a friendly peck on the cheek, but a passionate, intimate kiss between two people who clearly had feelings for each other. Nathan's hands were in her hair, and she was pressed against him like she never wanted to let go. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Here was my fiancé, at our engagement party, kissing another man while our friends and family celebrated our upcoming marriage inside. Betrayal was so complete and devastating that I couldn't even process it at first. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, watching the woman I loved betray me in the most public and humiliating way possible. When they finally broke apart, I saw Cassie's face clearly. She wasn't crying or looking guilty, she was smiling. This wasn't a moment of weakness or confusion, it was something she wanted to do. I cleared my throat loudly and they both turned around. Cassie's face went white when she saw me, but Nathan just looked uncomfortable. There was a moment of absolute silence where nobody knew what to say. Finally, I managed to speak. "What the hell is going on?" My voice was shaky, but I was proud that I got the words out at all. Cassie immediately went into damage control mode. She started talking rapidly, explaining that it wasn't what it looked like, that Nathan had been upset about something and she was just comforting him. She said the kiss was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything and that I was overreacting. But then Nathan did something unexpected. He looked at me with what seemed like genuine remorse and said, "I'm sorry, man. This is all on me. I asked her to meet me out here because I needed to tell her something before you guys got married." I looked at Nathan, then at Cassie, trying to understand what was happening. "Tell her what?" Nathan glanced at Cassie, then back at me. "That I'm still in love with her. I made a mistake letting her go in college, that I think she's making a mistake marrying you when we belong together." The honesty was brutal, but at least it was honest. I could respect Nathan for being direct about his feelings, even if I hated what he was saying, but Cassie's response was what really broke me. Instead of immediately shutting Nathan down or apologizing to me, Cassie got defensive. She said Nathan was being dramatic and that I was being an insecure loser for eavesdropping on a private conversation. She accused me of spying on her and said I was ruining our engagement party with my paranoia. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. She said I was being ridiculous and that if I couldn't handle her having male friends, maybe I wasn't ready for marriage. She called the kiss just a goodbye kiss and said I was acting like a child for being upset about it. The dismissive tone, the mocking laugh, the complete lack of remorse, it was more devastating than the kiss itself. This wasn't the woman I'd fallen in love with. This was someone who could betray me publicly and then gaslight me about it while our engagement party continued inside. I looked at both of them and realized I was done. "You're right, Cassie. I'm not ready for marriage to you." I took off my engagement ring and held it out to her. "Consider this your goodbye kiss from me." Cassie's expression changed immediately. She realized I was serious and started backtracking, saying she was sorry and that we should talk about this privately. It was too late. The damage was done, and I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. I walked back into the party, found my best friend Alex, 29M, and quietly told him what had happened. Alex was furious and offered to kick Nathan out immediately, but I told him I just wanted to leave. I made a brief announcement to our guests that there had been a change of plans and that the engagement was off. I thanked everyone for coming and apologized for the awkward situation. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Both families started asking questions, friends were confused and upset, and several people went outside to find Cassie and Nathan. I didn't stick around to see the aftermath. I just wanted to get out of there and process what had happened. I went home to the apartment Cassie and I shared and started packing her things. I wasn't being vindictive, I was just trying to create some space so I could think clearly. As I was packing, I found something that made everything make sense. Hidden in Cassie's nightstand drawer was a stack of printed emails between her and Nathan. They dated back 3 months, right around the time she'd said they'd reconnected as friends. The emails were explicit about their feelings for each other and detailed plans for secret meetings during her supposed late nights at work. But the most damaging email was one Cassie had sent to Nathan just 2 days before our engagement party. In it she wrote, "I can't wait to see you tomorrow night. I know it's risky meeting at the engagement party, but the thought of kissing you while Trevor is celebrating our fake engagement is such a rush. He's so clueless and trusting, it's almost too easy. After the party, we can finally be together without hiding." The email made it clear that this wasn't a moment of weakness or confusion. Cassie had been planning to betray me at our own engagement party. She'd been using our relationship as a cover while carrying on an affair with Nathan. The woman I'd loved and trusted had been systematically deceiving me for months. I took photos of all the emails and printed copies for my own records. Then, I had an idea for the perfect revenge. I called Cassie's father, Robert 52M, who had always been like a second father to me. Robert was a traditional man who valued honesty and integrity above all else. He'd been thrilled about our engagement and had been planning to give a speech at our wedding about how proud he was to have me as a son-in-law. When Robert answered the phone, I could hear the concern in his voice. He'd clearly heard about the dramatic end to our engagement party and was worried about both of us. I told him I was okay, but that there were some things about his daughter he needed to know. I explained what had happened at the party and told him about the emails I'd found. Robert was shocked and heartbroken. He said he'd raised Cassie to be better than that and that he was ashamed of her behavior. He asked me to forward him copies of the emails so he could understand the full extent of her deception. But then, I had an even better idea. I suggested that Robert come over to our apartment the next morning when Cassie returned to collect her things. I would hide in the bedroom and call his phone, leaving a voicemail that would play back Cassie's own words from the emails. That way, he'd hear directly from her how she really felt about our relationship and her betrayal. Robert was hesitant at first, but I convinced him that Cassie needed to face the consequences of her actions. She'd been manipulating both of us, and it was time for the truth to come out. Robert agreed to the plan, and we set it up for the next morning. Sure enough, Cassie came home around 10 a.m., looking exhausted and disheveled. She'd apparently spent the night at Nathan's place, which confirmed everything I'd suspected. She seemed surprised to see her father's car in the driveway, but didn't seem overly concerned. I hid in the bedroom and called Robert's phone, leaving a voicemail that quoted directly from Cassie's email to Nathan. I read the entire passage about how clueless and trusting I was, how she couldn't wait to kiss Nathan at our engagement party, and how our engagement was fake. I made sure to speak clearly and included the date of the email so there would be no confusion about when it was written. Then I hung up and waited. I could hear Cassie and Robert talking in the living room, with Cassie trying to explain her side of the story. She was using the same manipulation tactics she'd used on me, painting herself as confused and Nathan as pushy. She was telling her father that I'd overreacted and that the situation wasn't as bad as it seemed. That's when Robert's phone rang. He answered it, and I heard him say, "I have a voicemail from Trevor. Let me put it on speaker so we can all hear what he has to say." The apartment went completely silent as my voice played back Cassie's own words. I could hear her gasp when she realized what was happening. The voicemail was damning. It proved that she'd been planning the betrayal for months and that she'd been systematically deceiving everyone who loved her. When the voicemail ended, Robert's voice was cold and disappointed. "Is this true, Cassie? Did you really write these things about Trevor and your relationship?" I could hear Cassie crying and trying to explain, but Robert wasn't having it. He said he was ashamed of her behavior and that he'd raised her to be better than this. He told her that I'd been like a son to him and that she'd not only betrayed me, but also betrayed their family's values and trust. The conversation continued for about 20 minutes, with Robert expressing his disappointment and Cassie trying to justify her actions. But the damage was done. Her own words had exposed her completely, and there was no way to spin or manipulate the truth. Eventually, I heard Robert leave. A few minutes later, Cassie knocked on the bedroom door and asked if we could talk. I came out, and she was a mess, crying, disheveled, and clearly devastated by her father's reaction. She tried to apologize, saying she'd made a terrible mistake and that she wanted to work things out. She said she'd been confused about her feelings and that Nathan had manipulated her into the affair. She promised to cut all contact with Nathan and focus on rebuilding our relationship, but I was done. The emails had shown me who she really was, and there was no going back. I told her that her things were packed and that she needed to find somewhere else to stay. I said I'd already spoken to our landlord about removing her from the lease and that I'd be keeping the apartment. Cassie begged and pleaded, but I remained firm. I told her that she'd made her choice when she decided to carry on an affair for months and planned to betray me at our own engagement party. I said that I deserved better than someone who could deceive me so completely and feel good about it. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Word spread quickly through our social circles about what had happened. The emails I'd shared with Robert were passed along to other family members, and soon everyone knew the full extent of Cassie's deception. She lost the support of most of our mutual friends and several family members who were disgusted by her behavior. Nathan, surprisingly, backed away from Cassie once the truth came out. According to mutual friends, he'd been led to believe that she was planning to leave me for him, but when he realized the extent of her deception and manipulation, he wanted nothing to do with her. He apparently told people that he couldn't trust someone who could lie so easily to someone she claimed to love. Cassie tried to control the narrative by posting on social media about being heartbroken and learning from her mistakes, but too many people knew the truth. Her attempts to paint herself as a victim fell flat when people had seen the evidence of her calculated betrayal. Most satisfying part of the whole situation was that Cassie had destroyed her own reputation with her own words. I didn't have to convince anyone that she'd been deceptive and manipulative. Her emails had done that for me. She'd been so confident in her ability to deceive me that she documented her own betrayal in writing. 6 months later, I'm doing better than I ever imagined possible. The betrayal was devastating, but it also freed me from a relationship that was built on lies and manipulation. I've started dating again, and I'm much more aware of red flags and boundary violations. I learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people face the consequences of their own actions. Cassie thought she could manipulate everyone around her indefinitely, but eventually, the truth caught up with her. She lost not just me, but also the respect of her family and friends. The experience taught me that actions have consequences, and that people who betray others ultimately betray themselves. Cassie wanted to have her cake and eat it too, but she ended up losing everything she actually valued. Sometimes the best revenge is just stepping back and letting karma do its work.